and we are live. This is our third, third, yes,
Third.
third episode of Very Online People, which is like very appropriate because we're going to be talking about third spaces. So third episode, third spaces. I'm here with my beloved friend and colleague, one of my very best friends, Laura Vidal. Um, Laura is a researcher on many cultural aspects related and unrelated to the internet, but we are going to be focusing on the internet today because this is a podcast about all things internet, as I keep saying. So, um, Laura and I I mean, this is like what the podcast is about, right? We have these conversations. I have these conversations with my friends offline, and I'm like, oh, this could be interesting, potentially, maybe. Which is like, isn't that what all podcasts are at the end? Philosophical. So we talk a lot about the role of the internet in the construction of cross-cultural identities. Hi, Yang. In the construction of cross-cultural identities, and we have been talking a lot about the internet as a third space, right? As a place where we build relationships and a place where we exist. And this is something that I am very interested in for many reasons, but one of them being that I am researching and have been researching for years the existence of the self as something that is not necessarily linked to the body, but that experiences life and experiences the world and other people through other ways of existing. So I think that online, quote unquote online, and particularly social networks, including like very early social networks. I'm thinking GeoCities. I'm thinking like way back when. Um, are places where we, particularly the weirdos, not the popular girls and boys and thems, but the weirdos, us ourselves, have found our tribe, right? So and I think back to this because you and I, Laura, met through an online space, through Global
Right.
Voices, our huge community where we have gained so many important people in both our lives, right?
Correct.
And we have been friends for many years. I'm not going to say the specific number, but many of them. And most of our relation, I mean, we've met in person. I cherish those moments, but most of our relation happens in how VoIP calls mainly. Um,
Yeah.
always remember that we had this one day we started talking at what was my 9 a.m. and we ended the call at 7 p.m. the entire day together.
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly.
so we're gonna go into like the academic things, but I want to start with the personal experience. So like
Absolutely.
what is your experience of the internet as a third space and a space where you have built part of who you are now as a woman migrant, as a researcher on things online, on things on the internet. um, because we have this discourse, this current discourse that the internet is a horrible, horrible place and a toxic place, which it is. It is. But
Yeah.
it's also this, right? It's the place where we have
Absolutely.
built our careers and our friendships and our tribes.
Yeah. And it's a place where we asked ourselves so many questions that are really important for our worlds offline and on. I really like, there's this researcher that I really, really like. He's from Catalonia. Um, Manuel Castells. I really like it when he once said like, okay, we should stop talking about virtual realities. What we have are actually real virtualities because the world of online and offline are so close that having borders between one and the other is this it
Yes.
becomes more and more ridiculous, which borders are already pretty ridiculous, and they respond to so many things that are completely imaginary, that respond to the interests of those in power, of particular moments in history. So it's really interesting that these things you know, you can see them more or less with the same glasses, if you will, when you think about borders, when you think about spaces, when you think about identity, and when you think about the self. And I especially like talking about this with you, not only because we're friends and we became friends because of an international community, because we are both Venezuelans and we were both part of many ecosystems and probably crossed each other in reality, like offline worlds, without knowing. You spent a lot of time in the city that was next to mine. You spent some time in my city as well. You said once that my city was okay. No, I don't remember that. Many things that were not super cool happened to you in Maracay, which I
Every time I visit Maracay, something terrible happens to me. But
well,
also, and Eng, who is around, will attest to that. Like 95% of my friends are from Maracay.
so that is what to me is bananas, because of course we understand each other because we make a lot of jokes being both Venezuelan, more or less from the same generation, and we understand each other in that sense. But there's something about the fact that we met online while I was abroad, and now we're both out of Venezuela, and to me it's very much an illustration of this. So it's not the fact of being from the same place, because we've been in the same place that we didn't cross. We cross in this third base that is not national, not global. It's kind of, between both, and it has its own characteristics.
Yeah, Laura is Maracayera. And also, the first time we met in person, if I remember correctly, was two subway stations away from here, because it was in Santiago during the summit.
Right, it
That
was in
was in Chile. It
Santiago.
was like ages ago. I was not living in this country, like, no, at
Yeah.
all. This is I think that goes to show what you were mentioning, which is something that I strongly believe in. We don't say online and offline. Remember, like the Pirate Bay folks used to say way back when, this is for the internet grandmas and grandpas and grandem out there. We say AFK, away from keyboard, because we are always really online. And as time goes by, we're never not online, unless you are in like my hometown when like my mama spends 5 days
Yeah.
without the internet, but that's a different thing. Like most people, we are not online offline. We don't make a distinction between getting a phone call or SMS and getting a WhatsApp message, right? Because one uses the internet and the other one doesn't. That is not how life is. Like everything is
No.
happening online, mediated by technology in some way, mediated by the internet in some way. However, um, we do construct our identities. We have more control over the identities that we build online than over the identities that are like our legal identities that we carry on to the like physical. I also don't like that expression, the offline world, on the streets,
Yeah.
because those are mediated by states. And right now, that's not like, I mean, that not, now it's worse like, than it was way back when, because
Hmm.
it is mediated by Facebook and Twitter and Elon Musk
Yeah.
saying like what we can do. But when everything was filled, all of this was contributed. We had a lot more control over our identity. Yes, I'm talking about like my space situation. We digged into the HTML of the websites and we learned HTML that way. And so those identities and I don't know, we met friends at Habbo Hotel. Did you ever make friends at Habbo Hotel? I made friends at Habbo Hotel. Um, we had more control over those identities. And what I'm getting at with this is that everything in those spaces, like and why is like the demise, the progressive demise of Twitter affecting us so much? Because Twitter has lasted about like 15 years, and
Yeah.
so it is the one social network that has been around for so much. So the building of those identities there and of those communities and losing them, like that has a very large impact. So what
Yeah.
I'm getting at is, um, the important is and lies in the community that we have built. So the importance is relational, right?
Yeah.
Um, for us, our our communities, which are largely online, because we have built these networks that are built from people who come from different countries that are also like very often immigrants, so they're living
Mhm.
in a secondary place. So most places that we don't share, like neither place A or place B, so we
Yeah.
have like 4 places, 5 places, 6 places in
Mhm.
between. um, so what we share is the internet. That is
Absolutely.
our collective space, and there is a particular culture to that, right? So with
Agree.
that, which is what you were mentioning, why we understand each other beyond the fact that we are Venezuelans and we share all of these references, and we hate Chavismo, um, because we are very online people. And so we share this culture of onlineness, the culture of creating these relations, the culture of, like, as Eng mentioned, our moms told us to not trust people on the internet, but yet here we we met all of our best friends on the internet, right? So how do you, as like my resident expert on culture, like that's, and I'm gonna just say it, like on
That's so nice to hear.
multiculturalism. No,
Wow.
that's like, and also like, do you remember like this definition that we had like in high school of culture? Culture is everything that is made by humans, like, but by humankind. That
Yeah.
is culture. So you are my resident expert on everything made by
Wow.
humankind.
Wow.
Um, just
That's
that,
big. Like, well, that's a lot of responsibility.
So
But it's
as
still
that,
it's still very flattering. I like to hear it. Like I like to hear that
yeah,
I'm the expert on, like, I always loved
everything.
culture and everything that has to do with culture. And I will never forget, 'cause my, like, the base of my research is actually intercultural education, and I research on learning and the phenomena around acquiring knowledge, if you could call it like
Yeah,
that. And my biggest interest has been, um, what can you learn when you get in contact with people that don't come from your same background? No? Yes, and the first thing that came to mind when I was, naive enough to start a PhD on this subject, so thinking that intercultural communication is the most beautiful thing, and it's going to be wonderful. It's just like, imagine a German person and a Filipino person exchanging. That's so beautiful, and we all learn from each other. And no, it is not like that at all. It's
spoiler, it wasn't.
Oh my God, no, no. I thought it was this beautiful world in which we learn from one another. Because for me, getting in contact with different cultures was a source of growth, personal, intellectual, cultural, all of it. And culture in general is my that, the cultures, all of cultures, national, from communities and everything, they are the result of the mixes of things. And
Yeah.
even whenever we try to put things in boxes, we're always making mistakes with that, because it's impossible to put the human experience in a box. So, but that also means that this beautiful thing that indeed is very beautiful is also very uncomfortable, and a source of a lot of problems and a lot of inequalities, and a lot of power struggles and a lot of violence as well. Cultural interaction is something extremely messy. Um, and also, like, one of the things that came to mind when I heard you, this idea of, what humans build and identity. It feels like, if you have one messy thing, which is culture, that's the messiest thing ever. And if you want to think about something as messy or more, that's identity. So
Yeah.
there's no way that we get like, oh, let's have this light subject on. No. Identity is this thing that we build, that we imagine, that we believe in, and it keeps changing. Identity tends to be a fantasy, more or less. It's something that, it's a construct, and it's fed by what you believe of yourself, what others believe about you, what you think you are and you're not. And I'm gonna bring a reference that I really love from Americana, from Chimamanda Adichie, that we all absolutely love. And Americana is really a big essay on identity built
Yeah.
through the encounter with other people. And I don't remember in which moment this happened, but I do remember that there was one character reflecting on the fact that he had to um carry and deal with an identity that he didn't choose because he was a migrant. So a lot of things were put into what he was that he didn't know, that he didn't agree with, but it was still his identity as others put it on him. So when we go back to think about identity and how messy it has been, made of things that you think about yourself, the place where you come from, your family, the values, and all of that. What people put on you that you didn't choose, the things that neither you nor people around you put, that it's still part of this mishmash. And then you add to all of this the internet, where all of these balls of chaos come together and somehow they attract each other. So it is very important to think about identity in these terms and see how identity and the self is something that we build, sometimes following certain logic, sometimes not at all. And see how they are dictated sometimes by certain institutions. You were talking about the identity that is, kind of put upon us by the state and controlled. And now we've built identities online as some sort of self online. And now it's, there are other people coming for it. It feels like every time that we build an identity, somebody wants to come and control it.
Yeah.
And so before it was the state and
Mhm.
and other actors, and now it's, all these companies that are kind of uh trying to see how it is that they can deal with these identities and these selves. And
Monetize it, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
capitalize on it.
Yeah.
So whatever we build is going to, get milked somehow by somebody.
Yeah. Um, I wonder because this is one of the many things that I think that I three or four things that I keep repeating over and over, that everyone is like very tired of hearing me talk about, because they are the same things over and over. Is that we don't have an identity, we have identities, or we have an identity that is created by the sum of the parts, and so as we know that the sum is larger than the parts. Um, so we've been talking about these pieces that we made our identity with, right? So our existence, our interaction in different communities, both online and offline, our lives in different cultures and countries, which is like I find it very funny when people mock me or nag me because I have a Chilean accent. Sometimes, some days.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, I have been living here for 6 years, so that's how that happens. But also, I find it both like super interesting, but also like kind of sometimes nonsensical. The idea of cultural appropriation, depending on how it is posed. Like I know that for some purposes, like some of the movies that we used to watch way back when,
Oh my god.
where they had like an actor dress up as a Chinese person,
Oh, don't
those,
get
yeah.
me started.
But for a lot of things, like we take cultural pieces from other people and build them into our culture as individuals. I mean, not
Absolutely.
necessarily as a society, but that is kind of also what the internet is, right? Like I will engage with something that I am interested in, and because there is like this very large network that allows me to take a peek into, I don't know, Japan, then
Yeah.
I will fall in love with that culture, or with a piece of that culture, and I will incorporate it into my identity.
Yeah.
And though all of that is what cross cultural means. It doesn't necessarily mean that you, I don't know, like you are the granddaughter of an Italian man and then you feel Italian, which is also something that people mocks online. And yeah, like if you feel fucking Italian because you, I don't know, you had a no, then that's part of your identity. Yes, it is. It makes you annoying. Yes, maybe being annoying is also part of your identity. But that is how it is, right? Like we We go through life, and we go like, if you go to the beach collecting little pebbles, and we take those pebbles. I feel like a crow. Like I will take like something and I will bring it back, and it's mine now. And that is how you build your identity, through the experiences in your life.
Mhm. That's very interesting. Um, I'm thinking of some students I've had in this intercultural communication workshops that sometimes I lead, especially for tech students. And we build a chart, like an identity chart, precisely to understand how much your own identity can be fed by so many things. There are many, there are many layers. There are gender layers. There's the national culture. There's your generation. There's your gender. Precisely to understand that we're made of so many things. And we had a big conversation because invariably in that chart they tend to put what they like, and so we always have a discussion like, do if you put ice cream on your chart, is that part of your identity just because you like it? Because they put like pizzas and stuff, and they're French, so they put a lot of food in it.
I
So
mean, I will tell you that food is a very large part of my identity.
but
Please
that's
carry on.
part of the question indeed, and it was a very interesting discussion because I really wanted to push them to put things that were, in my mind, more
More eating.
identity,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
they will look more like something that identifies you, your skin color, the culture where you come from, the language you speak, what category do you occupy more or less within your family, or your profession, whatever, things that identify you, because at the end that changes too. At some point you can be like passionate about something and it's so much part of your identity, but that changes, and identity itself changes as well. There are aspects that change probably less than others, but still. And there was this big discussion on, okay, so why can't I put my passion as part of my identity? And I cannot answer that. I cannot answer that completely, because at the same time, yes, you can definitely put your passions as your identity, but I guess we should also remember that identity is also, whether we like it or not, is also made of what others sees
Yeah.
about us. Which also reminds me of this big phenomenon, for example, of the 23andMe, people having their DNAs and then seeing that they had like 32% Asian and 41% Native American, and then all of a sudden feeling that they are Native American. And there was in one of the advertisements that I saw once, there was this lady that took the test and she said, "Oh, I see. I'm 30% Irish. Now I understand why I am the way I am." But to me, these are really huge questions because there's a lot of confusion in terms of what parts of your identity and yourself are made of your origins, and what parts of your identity we believe come from this kind of cultural heritage. And it's a whole big confusion. And now when you were talking about cultural appropriation, which is another super complicated subject, and people always get angry whenever this discussion kind of appears, is that I think also that identities and cultures and what we think is ours or not is pretty dependent on power. You can see that people that tend to be pretty privileged, they feel really open and welcome to belong to any kind of community or adopt any kind of culture,
Yeah.
and being passionate for a certain culture and feel that culture very much part of them. They probably have the passports to go and live in those places and also become like,
Mhm.
oh, I really feel like an African. Whereas people that are in other sides of the scale cannot do that, or when they do, it's more of an adaptation, for survival. We are not in an equality of conditions just to do the ideal thing, which is exchanging.
Yes.
Like, it would be lovely if I could just put a kimono, or that we can. I would, and I adore all things
Yes.
Japanese, and since I was little, I used to love all things Russian, and I will learn all the Bellinis, all the fairy tales, and I would love the history and everything. And don't ask me why. I just did. No. You can invent yourself like this like, kind of thing of the soul and everything, but it's really something that is what attracts you. You know, we can go for a more spiritual thing. Like I don't know why I love this, but I do. But the active way of being able to use these cultural artifacts, of living
Yeah.
among those people, learning those languages, I believe they're really dependent on power. And not everybody can do them so freely and so nicely.
There are a couple of things there that I think are super important. Like the first one is that it's not the same at all to say, well, part of my identity is that I like this and that. I like manga, I like Studio Ghibli, I like Italian food, I like. And another very different thing is to say that because I don't know, I adopted all of this, then I am that. Because you cannot adopt the struggles and the history of different
Yeah.
people, right? So even though, like, I don't know, we Venezuelans, we like to make everyone Venezuelan, just like, oh, you like tequeños here or not any Venezuelan. That's on us. That's our privilege to do so. But the second thing is that the power dynamic, right? And the way that it is there is a power imbalance and there is an issue of privilege in being able to um, yeah, appropriate a culture, a different culture. And I find it like really interesting that the concept comes from like it is strange to say or think or to see an example of someone who is from Latin America and is appropriating like Arab culture, like we do belly dance,
Mhm.
and that is cultural appropriation. And that's also very disrespectful from the name, from the get-go. But really, people in Arab countries do not really fucking care. Cultural appropriation comes from the US. Cultural appropriation comes from a country that doesn't actually have a culture, and so steals the cultures of other countries. Sorry, my gringo friends. I promise that I will have gringos in this podcast at some point.
Mm,
They will come and they will say their piece. But for now, um, it is there is like a couple of things going on between not having a strong cultural identity, which is something that for many scholars, we Venezuelans also do not really have. We have like bits and pieces of our identity, but we do not have one like monolithic, a strong cultural identity, like a national identity, like other countries. And there's also the possibility where a person does not connect with their the identity that they have been granted, I would say. Like they were born in a country that, for instance, privileges being, I don't know, like how do you say it, like taking advantage of situations, and maybe that's not you.
oh,
So you identify more with some other things, right? Like
mhm.
as the person you were um, built to be.
Right.
So for some people who don't feel at home in their culture, and this might be for many a number of reasons, like just the culture
Yeah.
is doesn't fit them, but also because if you are like second generation immigrant, or like maybe you don't feel ever at home, and then you have to build something,
Yeah.
and that something is going to be made out of pieces, and then it's going to be very specific to you, right? So if
Mm,
you have like your dad is from Hungary and your mom is from Brazil, so you have like a very weird mix up, and you were born in Venezuela. You have a weird mix of things, and then you spend your entire life listening to Shania Twain online. Then yeah, culture
yeah.
is that. Culture is like a very, it's a wild thing. Like what I'm getting at is that it is dumb to attempt to classify people, and you were saying this at the beginning. These boxes where you say, okay, so you're Venezuelan, and that means this, that about yourself.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's not how we exist in the world.
No, nobody does. Nobody does. Like
But
you,
people pretend that we must.
But because I think
Yeah.
that it's a way to try to control the experience. You know, it's very annoying and pretty uncomfortable to deal with somebody where that you don't know where to put. I think that we all do that. We try to put somebody in a box to see how
Yeah.
we talk and how we interact with them. The first thing that we ever ask is either where you're from, if it's an international thing, or what
Hmm.
you do to see what kind of job you do, and how else do you kind of put a conversation on. But listening to you, there were a couple of things that I have slight disagreements on, and
Yes.
is the
I love
idea
those.
that we build bits, like our cultures are built with bits and pieces. That's the experience of every culture, even the American culture that they really. I'm not gonna. Like, I want to acknowledge that my use of they and ours can be a little messy at times. It's not my intention.
Because of what we are talking about
Exactly,
precisely.
because
So yeah.
precisely when we're talking about cross-cultural, when we're talking about
Yeah.
cultures in general, it's very easy to think about whatever is weird, whatever is different, and we're always going to find ourselves in trouble when we do that. I really like this idea that you have, like, cultural appropriation comes from the states, because they kind of have this, and I believe this is a belief, the fact that they have like this neutral culture, which I think is something that comes from the fact of being a powerful culture. Of course they have a culture made of bits and pieces, shows
It is
like
an
us,
omnivorous culture.
but
So
all of them are.
it is built from that. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, but
some
it's a
are more than
continuation.
others, but I think that what you're getting at, and I actually agree with you. I just like igniting people. Um, is that that is a culture. A culture that is a tapestry is a culture.
Cultures are
It's there.
tapestries. That's
Yeah,
part of their nature. And it seems pretty savage right now, the ways that they're happening, also because the communications have become so fast and so rich. But it was exactly the same before. I think that there
yeah,
was there was this. I'm sorry that I don't remember the name of the researcher, but I thought it was overwhelming when I saw that there were some paintings on the ceiling of a cathedral in Spain, and they had a lot of Aztec figures, and those were things that they brought from Mexico. It is never one way. And
yeah,
we are the result of those exchanges, as violent as they were, as messy as they were, as unequal as they were. We are the result of that too, and it always goes and comes in the experience of the States, which is the country that is made of migration of so many identities and a struggle to define who we are,
yeah,
coming from power, coming from white supremacy, coming from. It's a whole effort, it's a whole endeavor also to try to like, this is us and these are the others, and this is what we. And it's always messy, and somehow it's always wrong. Same thing with the idea of the Venezuelan culture. What are we? What It's, of course, it's
yeah.
messy. It's
It
and it's
cannot be this monolithic identity,
impossible.
like the national monolithic identity, because we are an immigrant country, a country built by immigrants, and
And
so
yeah, sorry, go
that
ahead.
which is no, I interrupted you, which is where I wanted to kind of bring you. I have been doing a thing. I have been doing a thing, which is to we have been talking about connected, about being connected, right? Right. Like so this identity is built cross culturally because of the connectivity that happens,
Mhm.
and so this is the internet, yes, but it's also like through many other ways and forms and like pop culture, television, film, music, all
Yeah.
of that. So the cultures that are more and they're never totally, but more like solid and monolithical are those countries that are more disconnected. Countries that have been historically more disconnected and have had less exchange, less immigration. Like I would say, for instance, that Chile until 10 years ago was a way more monolithical culture because they are enclosed between the ocean and the mountain, and they
Mm,
did not like foreigners, and they still don't.
mhm.
And so they have these very, very clear things or of like this is our food, these are our beverages, our music, this is what being Chilean means. And of course, it's not like pure. That's not a thing. That doesn't
Yeah, that's
exist.
not a thing.
But then the opposite of that is the US. The US is entirely made of migration. So everything there comes from somewhere else necessarily, and that doesn't mean that it's not theirs. Quite the opposite. It is.
Yeah.
It was built into, and it's also was converted into something else, which is like the last litmus test, I would say, when you say, okay, pizza, well, Chicago style pizza, New York style pizza, they took everything and they made it into something else, and that is their super cross cultural culture, right?
Hmm.
And it comes from being hyper connected, from being a global superpower. Yes, so they are pushing their culture onto others and their movies and their series, but they're also taking. And yes,
Yeah.
again, that giving and taking, depending on the culture, sometimes it's violent, and sometimes it's not necessarily violent. We don't have to go into that necessarily, but that's what
Yeah,
makes
well, that
the
will be a
culture,
conversation
isn't
that
it?
will take us hours, days,
Yeah.
semesters.
I mean, we could.
Yeah, the thing is that whenever I think of categories that think of cultures as monolithic, I think that those are kind of, I mean, I don't think that those are tools that can serve us. Because any
Mhm.
culture, whenever you zoom enough, you're gonna find the
Yeah.
patchwork. Because that's the nature of them. Because not two people are the same. And even if you have two, three, 10 people living in the same culture, they're all different. And so they live their culture and they push it to evolve in different ways.
In different ways, yes.
The example of Chile is very interesting, exactly, because this idea of defending themselves. This is our food. This is what being Chilean means. To me, is a way of defending what they believe the culture is, which means that it's kind of fragile. When
Yeah.
you have the need to defend something so much, it's because it's not very. And when you zoom in, you're gonna find things that they just they don't click. These things don't click with, and we always. It's I think it's part of the, I guess, our paradoxical nature. We want things to be clear from one
Mhm.
group, look like this, and have these characteristics, and we just don't get it. We don't get it. If we even think of the experience before the Spaniards arrived to all these lands and made all these mixes, they were still being mixed. There were, like, the Caribbean was a big place of exchange before the Spaniards came. Same thing with the indigenous people in the South. There are parts of South America that I mean, the Spaniards got so far, like, this is way far south. We're not going there. And then you had a lot of communities that thrived at some point, and I think it was in Chile, a lot of Mapuche will live like side to side to Spaniards, and then a little by little there were, they started to expand the Spaniards, and so
Mm.
there are many things that we cannot call exchanges. The thing is that even through violence, exchange is gonna happen. But there was one thing that you said before that they didn't get to respond to, because, and I think it was so important, and I think it illustrates this idea of how one culture cannot bathe the same way for two people. Like, we don't have the same way of living our Venezuelanness, for example.
Mhm.
Um, some people don't find their culture as a home, like the culture they were assigned as birth, a little bit like gender. You were assigned to be an American. No, but I don't like hamburgers. Those things can definitely happen. There were many, many things, but way too many that didn't make me feel at home in Venezuela, that I wasn't
Mhm.
comfortable with. Yet, I've been living in France for the last 15 years, and I cannot think of myself as anything else than a Venezuelan. Like, I
Yeah.
feel so much like the product of this patchworks. And there's a big patch in my patchwork that is French. I'm not calling myself French anyway. I think that also brings us to the idea of these identities and how uncomfortable they are, and how we can ask different questions, and at some point the toy is gonna break.
Yeah.
What makes you French? What makes somebody French? Right? These are
I
also,
love that because anyone would tell you that what makes you French is like having French nationality, which you do have.
which I do.
But that's not how it actually works.
Oh, so I want to tell this to somebody from the right wing. I am French. No, you are not. And it's so weird. It's just this misunderstanding of what makes us part of something. And I think that a lot of this comes from the idea of feeling menaced. And also, I will dare say, it's part of this very imperfect education that we receive in formal education spaces at school, where you are taught to be kind of, a child of the soil, in a sense. um when I think, for example, of the French system and how they teach you that, France is this thing, and it started in this place, and the French people look like this, and then you're going to have a lot of disagreements because France was a colonial power, and they have a lot of people. Not only they are a migration country, they were an empire. They expanded, they had people everywhere. And so, like, since what, 300 years ago, French people have all kinds of faces
Hmm.
and all
Hmm.
kinds of exchange. And you still want to sell us the idea that France is Catholic, white? It's like the Marianne love, with this, with the breast up. That's All those things are so old. The same thing that we try to learn, in Venezuela, when we thought about the War of Independence, and with the heroes and against Spain and everything. It was not that at all. It was a civil war. It was something that happened between poor peasants and white rich criollos. This things, they always want to give us this very Disney like narrative to build some sort of
Hmm.
identity. And of course, it's not going to work. It's not going to imprint on everyone the same. It's going to imprint probably in a group of people that are going to reject everything that is not that. That's I guess we all go back to the same idea of trying to define a culture or an identity in a few little items. It's not going to serve us. It's not.
Hmm. Hmm. I kind of want to go back to the notion of online spaces, because what you said about what zooming in and having the different places and different cultures, and you mentioned the Mapuches and the Amazonians, right? And I want to make like a very weird analogy with social media spaces now, because we are kind of trying to find where to go from the places that we like. And this is something that happens every few years, right? Like the place where we had our community falls apart because we don't own it, and it's owned by like an evil rich man. And it's always
Yeah,
an evil rich man, by the
it
way.
is.
um
Always a man.
Always a man. Like it's not all men, but it's always
But
a
it's always a
man
man.
somehow. And so we try to find a place to go, and right now we are scattered between like 5 different spaces, and none of them actually work. Like we are I have accounts in everywhere. Like I have a Mastodon account, a Threads account, a Blue Sky account. I have all of them. I have them all, and none of them actually do work because my community is not there. Like there are
Yeah.
bits and pieces of my communities, so it is a sort of immigration. Like I moved to Chile, and I
It is.
had like 3 friends here, and my friends who were in Venezuela were obviously in Venezuela and not here, or they left to like Ireland, fucking Ireland.
Yeah.
And then I found some other friends, like, and that is kind of the way I see immigration. You mentioned um, not feeling at home really in Venezuela, because I never felt like I fit in Venezuela. And then I left and I found my Venezuelanness.
Yeah.
Like my identity fell apart in like a million pieces, and I had to rebuild it. And I rebuilt it with the strangest things. Like I have Amigos Invisibles there now. I did not listen to Amigos Invisibles before,
No,
but
nobody
it's just
understands that we have amigos
nobody
invisibles,
knows.
but they're there.
they are there. So that it is what it is. And I have like this like very long list of Venezuelan music that I was not listening to before, but I listen to it now because that's who I am. And in the same vein, because one of the things that now know that is part of my identity as a Venezuelan is that I know how not to fit. I have never fit, so I don't fit here. I don't fit anywhere. That's who I am, a person who doesn't fit. If one day I would be like to fit somewhere, I would feel very strange. Like why? And for me, so, like we complain about Twitter, right? Twitter is a cesspool. Twitter is horrible, but it's our cesspool. We love it. So we are now moving to some other places, trying to find a place that might be ours for the next few years. I don't know. And I wonder, as we talk about the construction of online spaces where we
Mhm.
can create our communities, when we can maintain our communities and support these relationships, um, like what do you think and how do you see? Like I'm not gonna say like the future of the internet because it's kind of huge, but the immediate future of the internet. The internet is clearly going through like some massive changes right now. Like it's like a process, right? And
Yeah.
I personally, and I kind of want to also end this here because I want to leave it for the next conversations that we're going to be having the next weeks are about this as well. Um, but I personally, as someone who has been working on this, on like defending, protecting the internet for 15 years, I don't fucking know where we're going. So I
Yeah.
wonder, like, how do you feel about it, and how do you feel about the spaces that we still maintain? How do you feel about us creating our communities in places that are like built and maintained by evil white men, and like, where do we go from here?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a big question because I do see the internet as an extension of the spaces that we have built so far, which means that they're going to be as chaotic and as ever moving and evolving as we tend to be. I think that it's always going to be messy to try to see where you can, have your communities and where can you build these new spaces, because at some point some part of the people that you want in a place won't want to be in that place in particular. A little bit like, oh, you would really love to have a couple of the friends that to meet some other friends, but they are in different points of the planet. Or you have two friends that you love very much and they could meet in these third spaces, but they have their different third spaces and they won't interact. I think that, I don't know, I think that as it has happened, we're going to have a messy transition, and then some solutions will come up because our need to be in community is actually pretty big. I think that the movement of people towards one thing or another will bring us the answer. I guess that's what I feel. Because at the same time, there are many ways to build community and spaces. I think that I have some spaces that I've built with some groups. I have some spaces that I participate in with other groups. You and I have spaces that we have created. We have a freaking Pinterest board. I don't know anybody who has a Pinterest board. I have a Pinterest board with you, with images from books and literature and stuff like that. It's
Yeah,
very geeky. I love it. I adore it.
yeah.
And I always put more every time. And it's a source of joy. And I know that that's a space that is yours and mine. And at the same time, I feel that these spaces are being built somewhat naturally. That they are going to be spaces that are going to be built organically, and sadly those are spaces that are going to try to be dominated by people trying to capitalize in it. So I feel that it's always going to be this power counter power movement. As when we started, with all of this optimism of reading social media and thinking that we could report on, citizen media, like when this explosion of shit started happening online. We didn't have that before. We would report on the internet. I feel wonderful that we're discovering new communities, and then mess happened. I think we're going to build new spaces organically. They're going to become messy and then go somewhere else, become messy again, capitalized, and then build new ones. It's going to be, I think, constant movement, constant construction and destruction, and several cycles of life.
There was like extremely philosophical, like almost to a religious degree. Like we're
I think the
basically
internet brings that. The internet is very much like a mirror, something that we build with our hands, and so it reflects us in many ways.
so it will be whatever we build out of it.
And whatever we try to move away from.
I'm somehow not very optimistic about that.
I
Um,
I think that you can be optimistic about some moments of it and pessimistic about some others. And
yeah,
if we want, we can really go back to the whole culture identity thing. It's a patchwork, always moving, always changing,
yeah.
always the fruit of our imaginations.
Yeah, I think that that's an excellent point, and that's kind of the point I wanted to make maybe today, which is that we spend a lot of time in very specific places of the internet that are sometimes like I receive a lot of harassment constantly,
Mm.
so yeah, cesspool, right? But at the same time, there are places on the internet, and I know that Reddit is like trying to kill itself, but there are places in Reddit, for instance, where people just like will rally around someone and like gather money for someone's whatever, like not only
Mm.
like for a medical treatment part, but for like a quinceañera party or something,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
to
it's
make
great.
other people happy. And that is a reality. That is that those are communities that exist. Though that's like people trying to make other people happy. That's happening every single day, and it's happening in reality, and it's also happening in the fake videos where we see like a dog being friend with a duck, and like we cry, and it's actually not true. It was a montage, and then someone comes in the comments and say that is fake. Who cares? I
Cares.
don't care. Like, can you let me be happy?
Stop
So,
breaking my brain. Who
yeah,
called you?
stop raining on my parade. So, that's kind of my personally like my ending message for today is like, can we people let people enjoy things? Because truly, like when we try to like police what other people and like, this is like the topic of this past couple of weeks. Like people are dressing up in pink. Women are dressing up in pink and going to see a movie. Oh my god! Like how can they be? Are they are happy? And then you see people online being like, oh well, they are all hyped about the Barbie movie, while there are women in like Afghanistan who are cannot drive. What's like what has to do anything with anything? Like why can't you let people be
Where
happy
are
for
the
a second?
feminists? Where are
It's
the
it
feminists?
is 2023, and I feel that we need each and every one of us needs to like grab onto every shred of happiness that we can find, like
Yeah.
every bit of joy, whichever that might be. So if we can maybe let people be happy, like they are not gonna, it's not a problem. They're not gonna be happy for the entire month. They're gonna be happy for an hour and a half. It's okay.
And they're not harming anybody that I
Not
know of.
harming anyone. So I think that I saw a comment that was about the hatred that the hatred. Oh my god, that we Swifties get online because we are annoying. But we are just being happy and enjoying music. That is pretty much it. Like we're not like we're not telling just to listen. And then
Yeah.
like people who are going like dressing up in pink to see Barbie. Oh, then now everyone likes pink. What is the problem with pink? I
What's the
don't
problem?
understand.
Okay, well, they didn't like it before. That's called fashion trends
Yeah,
also.
we like it
We had
now, and then we won't like it again. That's how it works.
I saw this thing that I really liked. You had men putting costumes to go to movies for decades as superheroes. Nobody said anything. And now everybody's
We have
I
men
have
dressing up
Barbie.
like a specific color for like go sports, whatever sports that is. That is
And let
like
them do it.
completely normal.
Let
But
them
then
do
women
it.
decide to dress in pink, and it's a thing suddenly. Like we cannot. So what I'm
Have
getting at,
this
because I'm really the conversation, is that um, there are places online where like basically happiness is not allowed. So Twitter being one of them this few days. But there are also other places, and there are also ways that we can build our own spaces for our communities to exist and thrive. And I think that if we become conscious that this is what we have been doing, we have been creating and finding our tribes for many, many years. And this is
Yeah.
what the internet has been for many of us in the past 2 decades basically, a place to find people who can be our made up family, the people who are actually who have things in common with us.
Love
And
that.
I feel it very deeply, but coming from a very small town where no one had anything in common with me, I only found my tribe online. So we need to figure out ways to create spaces for those tribes to exist safely. That's
Yeah.
basically what I think I'm getting at. Um, so those, like, to understanding those third spaces and the importance of those spaces, in a way that allows us to create space for them, holding them and protecting them, and not letting evil millionaires take them away at any whim, right? Anything
Absolutely.
closing remarks?
I recommend. I know we're still with the companies that we don't like, but I still recommend to open a board on Pinterest with a friend. It's a huge source of joy, and joy
It
is
is.
presence.
It is actually very, very, very cool.
It is very
I endorse that recommendation. I also do recommend using whatever encrypted app or not encrypted app of your choice to hold like 10-hour long voice calls with friends who are like on the other side of the ocean.
yep,
Why
yep, yep.
not? Like you just do the dishes, and like you just have your phone, like your friend in your ear the whole time, and you do the dishes, and then you like make breakfast, and like your friend makes dinner because she's like in France, and then like, it's a beautiful way to spend the day.
It is, and it's funny because when we were little, our parents will say, "Hang up the phone." Phones are not to like to make a visit. Remember?
Yeah,
Phones are not made to make visits.
yeah.
Yes, they are. No,
Yes,
they
they
are.
yes, they are very long visits. Actually, you can even watch a movie together. Like
Oh
each
yeah,
one of the
you
did
get
play at the same time.
do that. Do that. Create.
I yes, we endorsed by Marianne and Laura. Laura,
Absolutely.
thank you so much as always.
This
Always
has
a
been
joy.
super fun. I could have, as you know, go on for hours with this
I
thing.
mean, we can and we will without the audience. But thank you for doing it for the audience today. I really
Absolutely,
appreciate
absolutely.
you
Whenever you want to
always.
come geeking with us or build a board with us, let us know.
Yeah, let us know if you want to like create a Pinterest board with us. It's fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
This episode will be on Spotify later today, and on every place that you can find your podcasts by tomorrow, probably. And we will meet you next week. I don't know which day just yet, but we will meet you next week on episode number 4. Thank you for listening, and bye
Wonderful.
bye. Bye.
Bye.